now to a scandal that's rocked the Bush administration. Former White House Deputy Karl Rove is vowing to fight a congressional subpoena to testify on the politicization of the Justice Department. Last month, the House Judiciary Committee gave Rove a July 10th deadline to answer questions on the prosecution of former Alabama Governor Don Siegelman and the firing of 9 U.S. attorneys. House Judiciary Chair John Conyers has rejected an offer from Rove's attorneys that would have had Rove appear on condition his testimony not be under oath and not be transcribed. Rove now says he'll let the courts decide. The firing of the 9 U.S. attorneys will likely be remembered as one of the biggest scandals in the Bush administration Justice Department. A number of political motives have been linked to the firings, including the attorneys' refusal to pursue voter fraud cases, a top issue for Republicans. The firings helped bring down former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, who resigned in August of last year following months of scrutiny.
Yesterday, I met with President Bush and informed him of my decision to conclude my government service as Attorney General of the United States, effective as of September 17, 2007.
President Bush publicly defended Gonzales at the time, saying he'd been targeted for political reasons.
After months of unfair treatment that has created a harmful distraction at the Justice Department, Judge Gonzales decided to resign his position, and I accept his decision. It's sad that we live in a time when a talented and honorable person like Alberto Gonzales is impeding from doing important work because his good name was dragged through the mud for political reasons.
The Bush administration's denial of a political motive in the firings has unraveled with a series of pieces of evidence, including testimony from former aides and leaked White House emails. Perhaps the most well-known of the ousted U.S. attorneys is former New Mexico prosecutor David Iglesias. He has just come out with a new book called Injustice, Inside the Scandal That Rocked the Bush Administration. He joins us now from Washington, D.C. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you. Good to be here, Amy.
It's good to have you with us. First, your thoughts on this historic day. We were just talking about the results last night and Barack Obama becoming the presumptive nominee. I mean, of course, you are a Republican, if a disillusioned one.
Right. Well, Obama, to me, represents all the promise of America, that a biracial man from a broken family can rise and have a strong shot at becoming our next president. Incredibly inspirational. His rhetoric is soaring. It reminds me of speeches I've heard from Kennedy and Martin Luther King. Just beautiful stuff. It really makes me proud to be an American. Also, a biracial person, grew up tricultural in Latin America and in the U.S. I have a lot of warm thoughts to Barack Obama.
I mean, this is interesting. You are a Republican. The big question is, where will independent Republicans go, or independents and Republicans? Are you endorsing Barack Obama?
I'm not endorsing anybody, Amy. I'm just saying that at a very emotional, visceral level, I have a lot of respect for what Obama represents. I mean, our country has elected white males from northern European countries going back now 230 or so years. This finally represents that the top position in American government is really open to everyone. And I think that's sending a powerful message not only to Americans but throughout the world.
Why don't you begin where you began your book, Injustice? You started with 2 words, injustice.
Yeah, well, that's very much a play on words, because I was obviously within the Justice Department working as a U.S. attorney. There are 93 of us. We enforce federal law. My Southwest border colleagues in Arizona and Texas and California and my office, we carried the lion's share of the Justice Department's work in terms of immigration prosecutions and narcotics prosecutions. So I was working within the Justice Department. I was part of former Attorney General Ashcroft's advisory council. So I came to Washington every month or two for about a 1 to 2 year period. Also, obviously, a play on words, because what happened not only to me and my colleagues was an unjust result. because the history of the department, the history of United States attorneys, was that politics were not to be factored in our prosecutions. In fact, Ashcroft told me that. He told my fellow U.S. attorneys as we were being interviewed 7 years ago, almost to the month, that politics should never be part of our decision-making process as prosecutors.
How did you come to be the U.S. Attorney of New Mexico?
Well, I did lots of things, including running legal offices in New Mexico at the state and local government. I'd served in the U.S. Navy JAG Corps, spent 4 years of active duty. I've been a reservist now for over 20 years. But I think my biggest political credential was running for State Attorney General as a Republican in 1998. It is a political appointment, but I really want to make this crystal clear. Not only the expectation, but the requirement, similar to federal judges, is that once a United States attorney is confirmed and in office, they cannot engage in partisan political activities or be subject to it.
A Few Good Men. Tom Cruise's character was based on you. Is that right, David Iglesias?
Amy, that's partially true. I had two other colleagues that tried two separate cases in Guantanamo. But yeah, I went down to Gitmo back in 1986, and that's where the movie has its genesis.
So talk about how September 11th shaped who you are, what happened, where you ended up.
Right. 9/11 was a real sea change for law enforcement, because previous to 9/11, law enforcement and intelligence services didn't really speak to each other. Obviously, with the advent of the Patriot Act, the wall of separation came down. And when all of us came into office, the class of 2001 is what I call it. John McKay in Seattle was also part of that group. I believe Charlton in Arizona was also. We were tasked and even given orders at our first U.S. Attorney meeting here in Washington, D.C. in November that our #1 job was to fight terrorism. Everything else paled in comparison. I distinctly remember a meeting in front of the Pentagon where the airplane hit with Ashcroft and virtually all the new U.S. attorneys, and them giving us, it was almost like a secondary commission. This is why we're here. This is your job, is to prevent this from ever happening again. It was a very inspirational moment.
And then talk about your Pearl Harbor. Talk about December 7th, 2006.
Yes. So fast forward to December of 2006. Ironically, I'm doing Navy Reserve duty in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm flying back home to Albuquerque. I get a message at Baltimore Washington Airport on my BlackBerry to call Main Justice. And so I did, thinking that was kind of an odd thing since I had not called them. And I talked to my friend, Mike Battle. I need to state that he still is a good friend. And Mike just said, look, the administration wants to go a different way. We want you to submit your resignation effective the end of next month. And I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? I was given no warning. Had you warned me, I could have probably fixed the problem. And Mike's answer was very telling. His answer was, Dave, I don't know, I don't want to know. All I know is this came from on high, which told me this came from the White House or possibly the AG's office.
So now back up and explain what led to this. When did you start to get an inkling? When did you start to get a sense things were very wrong with what you were being asked to do?
Well, about a week. I mean, I was in a state of shock for a long time. And I thought, I wonder if I'm alone. Well, I called Johnny Sutton, currently serving as U.S. Attorney in Austin. Johnny was a friend of mine, and I tried to get him to provide some assistance to get the administration to reconsider, because I knew I'd been doing a good job based on the Justice Department's own evaluation team. And Johnny just said, look, this is political. If I were you, I'd just let it go and go away quietly. So I thought I was the only one at first. And then McKay in Seattle sends this very cryptic email out 1 week later. I emailed him right back saying, did you get the same phone call I did? He said, yes, there are, I believe, up to 10 more. So I asked John who they were. I just started calling them. And within 2 weeks of our December 7th phone call, I was able to figure out, we were able to figure out, there were at least 7 or 8 of us that had gotten the same phone call. And
on the
I knew
same
the history
day?
of the office.
A number of you
Exactly.
on the same day?
All 7 of us got the same phone call from Mike Battle on Pearl Harbor Day.
Well, now explain the whole issue of these voter fraud cases and the calls that you started receiving.
Right. In the election cycle of 2004, there's been a tremendous amount of local publicity in New Mexico about alleged voter fraud. And the sheriff of Bernalillo County, Darren White, who's currently running for Congress, had made a lot of splash about there's voter fraud out there. The U.S. Attorney needs to do something about it. So I convened, only one or two election fraud task force convened in the country. And it was state, local, and federal law enforcement. I worked with the Justice Department. We took over 100 complaints. I set up a toll-free number. I had a press conference. And then we looked at